Welcome to the Library of Virginia. I'm Sarah Falls, Chief of Researcher Engagement here at the library. I'm very pleased to welcome Linwood Norman, who will be discussing his book, When Mayor Doug Wilder Ruled Richmond, Strong Arm Politics in Virginia's Capital City. L. Douglas Wilder, our nation's first elected Black governor, returned to public service in 2005 as the first popularly elected mayor of Richmond in 60 years. In his new book, Linwood Norman, a former press secretary to the mayor, recounts the turmoil of Richmond's transition to the strong mayor model of local government during what was a memorable chapter in the city's rich political history that is still deliberated today, more than 15 years after Wilder's charismatic tenure concluded. And I have to say, I only got to meet him one time, but he is charismatic. So now I'll welcome to the stage Mr. Norman.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out on this brisk spring day, a sunny day. We've had a lot of rain lately, which is good in view of the pollen. Here's a photo of the mayor on the day of his swearing in at the Greater Richmond Convention Center in January of 2005. He was almost 74 years old at the time, and as mayor, he served a 4-year term. To start off my presentation today, I think it's good to, when you're describing an individual and his subsequent actions as an adult, it's useful to begin by looking at that individual in their childhood years in order to gain a more complete understanding of the characteristics and behavior that they carry with them to adulthood. So let's get started with that. Today we're going to talk about when Mayor Doug Wilder ruled Richmond, and I will share my recollections of working with him. Lawrence Douglas Wilder was born on January 17, 1931. You can do the math, but I will do it for you. Wilder is now 94 years old, and he remains quite active. In fact, today he's at a banquet awards ceremony at a hotel in downtown Richmond, where he'll be presenting as part of the Wilder School. Doug Wilder was the 7th of 8 kids. He had a brother who was 10 years older, and he had 6 sisters. That's a lot of sisters. The family lived in a house at 28th and P Street in segregated Churchill in the Richmond area, but the house was torn down many years ago. He was always called Douglas in their home, never just plain Doug. Here's how a childhood friend described Douglas Wilder at the elementary school they attended together. Quote, "He was always gifted with the ability to speak. He had a golden tongue. He was the one who was always chastised for talking out of turn in class. Or if there was any mischief underway, he always seemed to be a part of it." Unquote. Even though he could not sit still, Wilder described himself as precocious at an early age. He was a straight-A student when he attended the all-black George Mason Elementary School and then later at Armstrong High School. He admits that his parents would have put him on the medication called Ritalin to calm him down as a child. The following statement is taken from his autobiography titled Son of Virginia, and here's how he described himself. Quote, "I was a ball of fire. If they had had Ritalin back in the 1940s, I no doubt would have been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I was a very good student, always making A's and always getting an equal number of demerits for either being late or furnishing the answers to questions being asked of the other students. My teachers eventually had to discourage me from raising my hand in class because I couldn't stop myself from dominating the discussions, unquote. Douglas adored his older brother, Bob, who's shown in the photo on the left, because Bob always took him under his wing when they were together in their neighborhood. At their Churchill home, the family raised chickens, guineas, ducks, homing pigeons, and in this photo on the right, he's shown with what looks like a litter of baby pigs. Many of you may already be aware that Wilder served in the Army during the Korean War. He earned the Bronze Star for valor on the battlefield, and he later climbed to the rank of sergeant. Lesser known to most people is that Wilder loved to sing, and he had the voice for it. According to the Washington Post reporter Donald Baker, Wilder made a name for himself as a singer, first as a child in church socials, and then when he continued his love of singing by performing in bars as a young man with his deep baritone voice. In the photo on the right, he's singing while he was in the Army, stationed at Camp Breckinridge in Kentucky. After his military service, Wilder used the GI Bill to go to Howard University to get his law degree. Getting a law degree was not possible in Virginia due to segregation, so he went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. He later established his law practice in 1959 and entered politics 10 years later in 1969, where he won a state Senate seat in a three-man race. During his political career, he won every election in which he was a candidate. He broke the racial barrier, and he set a number of milestones along the way. This photo comes from the book that was written about Wilder by the Washington Post reporter Donald Baker. And in that book, Baker described Wilder as the dude. He became known for his stylish dressing, he driving around in convertible cars, and enjoying the finer things in life that come from being a successful lawyer. You might also notice the hairstyle, a fro, which was popular at the time. I imagine this photo was in the early to mid-1970s. I did some research because I was curious who was in the painting on the wall behind him, and I found that it is Governor Harry Byrd Sr. He ran, of course, the Byrd machine and the massive resistance movement by closing public schools rather than integrating them. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if this photo was not staged in order to show the irony of Wilder, a person of color and state senator, smiling as Governor Byrd was in the background looking over his shoulder. As lieutenant governor, Wilder was the first black to hold statewide office in Virginia. And here he is shown presiding over the state senate. Next would come the major event that would place Doug Wilder firmly in the history books. L. Douglas Wilder was the first elected black governor in the United States. Here he is shown at the swearing in at the state capitol with Lieutenant Governor Don Beyer and Attorney General Mary Sue Terry. He won the governor's race by the slimmest of margins. He won by less than 0.5%, which represented about 6,500 votes out of more than 1.7 million votes that were cast. It was years later, after leaving the governor's mansion, that he thought the mayor of Richmond should be elected by the people instead of being chosen by fellow council members. He thought a popularly elected mayor would lead to greater accountability and transparency in government. So, in 2003, a citywide referendum was held, and the voters overwhelmingly approved the idea of electing their mayor. Then the election was held the following year in 2004, and Wilder made the surprise announcement that he decided he would run for mayor himself. He won by a nearly 80% landslide and carried all of the city's 9 council districts. So only 10 years after leaving the governor's mansion, he was back in the political spotlight, taking charge. It was a stirring year, to say the least, as shown in the newspaper headline on the right, which also noted that Wilder has shaken up Richmond. On the campaign trail, many of you may remember that Wilder promised to eliminate inefficiency in government, and as one columnist described it, Wilder carved up the city's sacred cows into hamburger meat. This is an editorial cartoon by Gary Brookins, whose work is published in the Richmond Times-Dispatch at that time. As you can see, the wrecking ball is getting ready to strike the City of Richmond bureaucracy. Here's how Style Weekly described Wilder's first year in office as mayor. Quote, "For the last 12 months, Richmond's first popularly elected mayor in half a century hasn't only shaken things up, he's jackhammered the foundation," unquote. Style Weekly also named him Richmonder of the Year in 2005, noting that he was perhaps more powerful as mayor than when he was governor. As Richmond's first strong mayor, Wilder received additional powers that strengthened his position and produced fundamental changes in how the city would be operated. Many of these changes did not sit well with the city council because it reduced the amount of power they used to have. Wilder assumed many of the responsibilities and duties of the old form of Richmond government that had belonged to the city manager. Wilder also was able to run circles around the city council because one only needs to consider the stature of the incoming mayor and his breadth of experience. Wilder had a total of 24 years of experience when you add up his term as governor, lieutenant governor, and state senator. He had extensive firsthand experience in state government and a vast network of individuals in high places that he could call upon when he needed to. In 2005, the city of Richmond became the first city in Virginia to have what is called the strong mayor form of government. The change was described by some observers as Richmond's political experience in progress. To this day, for 20 years now, Richmond remains the only city in Virginia to have a strong mayor form of government. Shown here is Wilder being welcomed at a council meeting during his first year in office. He had what some consider to be a rock star personality that could light up a city council meeting. Richmond Magazine summed it up this way, quote, When most people walk into a city council meeting, reporters glance at them and look away. When Doug Wilder makes one of his periodic strolls through council chambers, the place murmurs to life. Here's Doug. Previously slumping reporters get up from their seats and follow him with a pen in their hand. When Wilder's around, council is forgotten, unquote. Though Wilder could light up a city council meeting, however, his appearances before council were not always, shall we say, pretty. Here's an example. The Richmond Times-Dispatch described one council meeting as an unprecedented 40-minute argument between the mayor and the city council. This was during his second year in office. So it's safe to say that an unsteady relationship existed between the mayor and the city council, and the school board too, for that matter. One of Mayor Wilder's major initiatives was known as the City of the Future program, and it focused largely on public education. The City of the Future program was a sweeping $300 million five-year plan that would build or modernize 15 city schools without any increase in taxes. Here, in the photo on the left, is Wilder giving his first State of the City address in January of 2006. In addition to building regular schools, he wanted to create specialty schools that would represent a new path for local education. He wanted to establish a new high school for the arts and establish a new high school for math and science. Both would be operated as charter schools, which meant they would operate independently from the city school system, which the mayor felt was too bureaucratic and top-heavy. Some would consider it ironic, however, that no new schools were built during the 4 years he served as mayor. Here's a photo on the right that shows what goes on behind the scenes in a typical day at City Hall. This is a photo of Wilder in his office in a meeting with Harry Black, who was the city's finance director, and me. As you can see, a lot of stuff crossed the mayor's desk. So I would like to shift gears now in my presentation, and I would like to show some distinct situations and at times unexpected or less remembered circumstances, and how Mayor Wilder handled those issues. So let's begin with this situation. This is what the tennis and basketball courts at Battery Park looked like in September of 2006. The situation in Battery Park was caused by extensive rains and flooding due to a collapsed sewer line. As the water level rose in the park, the mayor ordered an emergency evacuation of more than 400 households that were moved out of their homes within a 2-hour period. Heavy rain came back about 5 weeks later and necessitated a second evacuation. About a dozen homes were beyond repair and had to be torn down. To me, this situation exemplifies how Wilder dealt with a crisis. He mobilized extensive measures to help people who were impacted by the flooding. How did he do it? The answer is he brought the services of Richmond City Hall to them. A mini City Hall was set up at an elementary school where city employees were on hand from the departments of community development, public utilities, public works, health, social services, and parks and recreation, so that the people did not have to travel down to City Hall for assistance. Instead, Wilder brought the city services to them. Now let's focus on downtown redevelopment. Miller and Rhodes, which offered a grand shopping experience in downtown Richmond in its heyday, went bankrupt and closed in 1990. And though there were plans to renovate the building into a hotel, nothing was happening by the time Wilder entered office in 2005. The building had been closed by that time for 15 years. 15 years. Wilder took action and resuscitated the project by bringing in an additional developer so that adequate financing would be available for the project to begin. In the photo on the left, Wilder is among the speakers announcing the start of construction in 2006. The photo on the right is actually a rendering of what the finished project would look like. It became a Hilton hotel and a condominium complex that opened in 2009. This is an example to me of where the mayor stepped in and fixed a problem that had continued for several years. Another distinct situation facing Mayor Wilder was his determination to clean up neighborhoods that had litter, tall grass, and dilapidated buildings. The mayor frequently noted that it is well known that crime and blight go hand in hand. The city strengthened its housing code enforcement efforts by having what is called a vacant building registry that tracked the conditions of 3,400 unoccupied buildings across the city. Housing code inspections increased from 26,000 in 2006 to more than 47,000 in 2008. Buildings that were vacant for 12 months or longer had to be boarded up and secured, or either repaired and made suitable for occupancy. City code inspectors also could issue a summons on the spot for violations, which actually expedited those cases going to court. The benefits of code enforcement were especially apparent in cleaning up sections of Broad Street in downtown, such as at 2nd and Broad, which is a major gateway into the historic Jackson Ward neighborhood. By the time Wilder entered office in 2005, plans were already underway to modernize the Carpenter Center on East Grace Street, not too far from City Hall. The original Performing Arts plan also included building a new symphony hall. Wilder took issue with the fundraising efforts for the project and whether the general public actually supported it. He wanted to make sure the city did not overextend itself with an extremely heavy financial commitment. In March of 2005, during his third month in office, Wilder offered this assessment of the situation. Here's what he told a newspaper reporter at the time, quote, "I'm like the old elephant going across a bridge. I put one foot on it and shake it to see if it can take a second foot. I don't want to commit the city financially until I see a way to get across," unquote. Over time, the Carpenter Center was restored, and a symphony hall was never built. This is an instance where Wilder stood his ground as the strong mayor and challenged a project that had been unanimously endorsed by City Council. I won't go into any additional details on this because I devote an entire chapter in the book on the Performing Arts Project. Mayor Wilder was a strong believer in preserving the open waterfront along the James River. You'll see in the photo on the left the view of the James River when you're standing at the overlook at Libby Hill Park in Church Hill. This view had a striking geographic similarity to a town just outside London, England, that is called Richmond upon Thames, as in the Thames River. The phrase known as the view that named Richmond was coined by William Byrd in 1737 and that's how Richmond got its name. In 2006, the owner of one of the private properties along the open waterfront had proposed building a high-rise condominium project that would not only restrict public access to the river, it would also block the historic view of the James River as seen from Libby Hill Park. As you can imagine, historic preservationists were up in arms. Wilder did not favor the condo project, and it ultimately fell apart. The high-rise condominiums were never built, and the land eventually became part of the James River Park system. To me, what is important to remember, however, is that Wilder's actions were highly instrumental in preserving the view that named Richmond. In addition to preserving the open waterfront along the James River, Wilder wanted to build a marina in the city's east end. However, the city council did not go along with the mayor's proposal for a marina. This was at the time that the waterfront development known as Rockets Landing, which is located at the city's border with Henrico County, was already planning to build its own marina, as shown in the rendering on the left. So Wilder wanted the city to build a smaller marina and enter into a joint venture with Rockets Landing so that the recreational activities such as tall ship festivals could be held, such as you see there, the Schooner Virginia, shown on the right. However, again, the City Council did not agree with the proposal, and it went nowhere. Today, with all of the interest to maximize the beauty and recreational possibilities of the James River for everyone to enjoy, some people might say that Wilder was ahead of his time on this issue. Mayor Wilder was keenly interested in the operation of the public school system in Richmond. He believed that education was the key, and he was greatly concerned that the city's school system was spending $71 million more to operate each year than the statewide average. The Richmond Public Schools also showed very poor academic results, such as having graduation rates that were among the lowest in the state. Among other things, Wilder revamped the school system's truancy program. Under his program, parents were contacted after a child's 3 unexcused absences, instead of the school system's policy of waiting until 10 absences. Wilder also demanded a comprehensive audit to show where money was being spent. He criticized the school system's poor maintenance of its buildings, and he had repeatedly asked the school board to leave City Hall to move to a new location. The mayor expressed these concerns in a video that I'm about to show you, taken from his online newsletter called Visions. Wilder starts off by talking about the amount of money that could be saved if the school system had followed the recommendations by the city auditor.
The $20 million that could have been saved last year, the 6.7 that they say now could be saved, and this is still partial. When you add them all up, I understand the amounts come to about 50-some plus million dollars. The thing that bothers you is, though, you hear all these people are talking about they need more money. To do what? When you look at the abysmal graduation rate of our kids, the lowest in our area, the lowest in, one of the lowest in the state, when you look at all those core cities like Portsmouth and Norfolk in the 80 percentiles, when you see the statewide average at 79%, and where is Richmond? 47% of our kids graduate from school. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've been preaching to this group for the last 2 to 3 years I've been saying that there must be change. I came in on the ushering of change and the culture of cesspool of inefficiency, ineffectiveness. It is as residing in the school system as any other place. So there has to be change in the school system from the top. You've got to have new people on the school board, and you have to have new people running our school system. In the absence of that, nothing is going to change.
So as you can see, the mayor had strong opinions about the school system, very strong opinions. Take a look at this headline that was carried in the Richmond Times-Dispatch in December of 2008 at the end of Wilder's term as mayor. He was called the master of the big surprise because, among other things, he ran for political offices that he was warned he could never win. Yet we know he proved them wrong. To that, I would like to add what he did regarding the Richmond school system. As you may recall, the school board did not want to leave its offices at City Hall, even though the mayor had been requesting for more than 2 years that they move to a new location. So once again, it was time for the big surprise. Here is what happened on September 21st, 2007, nearly 18 years ago. By around 7 o'clock that night, the moving trucks began lining up around City Hall, ready to dismantle and pack up the school board offices to be moved out of City Hall. Before the attempted eviction, the City Council had approved an ordinance that allowed the school board to continue to rent space and remain in City Hall. So it ultimately became a question as to who had the authority to decide whether the school board could remain in City Hall. Was it City Council, or was it the strong mayor? A circuit court judge had already ruled against the mayor, so he planned to appeal the matter to the Virginia Supreme Court. A few months after the failed eviction, an editorial in the Richmond Times-Dispatch offered this assessment of the situation. Quote, "Just how much authority remains to be sorted out. There are different ways to go about that. Wilder prefers the World Wrestling Entertainment approach, with bright lights and braggadocio. That doesn't automatically make him wrong on any particular debating point, but it does predispose many residents to view his claims with a jaundiced eye. Then again, residents should have expected fireworks when they elected him," unquote. It was in the following year, in 2008, that Wilder decided to retire from public service by announcing he would not run for a second term. Shown here is another great editorial cartoon by Gary Brookins. Wilder's announcement was carried in newspapers across the country. The Washington Post praised him for a political career that broke racial barriers. The paper's editorial also stated the following, quote, "His decision marks the end of one of the most remarkable careers in any era, and a farewell from center stage for an outsized, prodigiously gifted public servant," unquote. Even though the mayor's approval rating had dropped following the attempted eviction of the school board, he did receive high marks for delivering results. A city council-sponsored poll at the time showed that 81% of citizens said they believed Richmond was headed in the right direction. Wilder said he focused on results rather than personality. He told the Virginian Pilot newspaper the following, quote, "I've done everything I could do. The people didn't like my style, but they liked the direction the city was heading. I wouldn't expect people to emulate my style. You're not going to get things done sitting around singing Kumbaya, unquote. So, even with Wilder's retirement from office, there were still important issues that remained with regard to the city charter. Who had the authority to rent out space in City Hall, such as the City Council had done by renting to the school board? Another issue involved who had authority to hire and fire city employees. To settle those lawsuits that the City Council had brought against him, Wilder planned to take those cases to the Virginia Supreme Court. Let's look at each of these cases. Regarding the City Council renting out space at City Hall, Wilder wrote in an editorial, quote, "When the City Council decided to bypass the executive and to negotiate contracts on its own, and then to direct the mayor to execute them, it prepared a recipe for chaos," unquote. He went on to add the following, quote, the city charter places administration in the hands of the mayor. When the council tries to take over the day-to-day administration of the city by passing ordinances controlling the minutiae of administration, the letter as well as the spirit of the charter has been violated, unquote. Regarding the hiring of city employees, Wilder said the wording of the city charter only gave City Council the authority to hire for the offices of city clerk, city auditor, and city attorney. So with the two lawsuits that were brought against the mayor, renting office space at City Hall, the hiring and firing authority of the city employees, the question could be asked, why not go back to the General Assembly and ask them to straighten out the charter-related issues that had led to the two lawsuits against the mayor in the first place? The answer is that the General Assembly does not involve itself in charter issues that are tied up in litigation. Legislators do not want to sponsor any charter legislation that involves controversy. Instead, they want to sponsor legislation where there is a strong agreement among all of the parties concerned. So, because the General Assembly was essentially off limits, Wilder planned to take the cases to the Virginia Supreme Court. However, there was not enough time. Wilder's term as mayor was coming to an end. Time had run out. Even though the Virginia Supreme Court had agreed to hear those cases, the new incoming mayor, Dwight Jones, went ahead and dropped those appeals to the Supreme Court soon after taking office in 2009. Once those appeals were dropped, however, the question still remained: who had the authority, the strong mayor or the city council? Those questions involving authority remain unanswered to this day. As I mentioned earlier, when the city of Richmond changed to the strong mayor form of government, it was described by some observers as a political experiment in progress. Now, 20 years later, those questions still remain as to who holds the authority. And the bottom line is that the work required to resolve those issues remains unfinished. Thank you. I think we'll now open it to question and answer, if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. Interesting presentation. Am I heard? Okay. I have 20 questions. I'll ask them all, and you can answer as many of them as you think you can. I'm new here, so forgive some of them. In your remarks about the mayor's fights with the school board and the city council, of course, can't help but remind people of what's going on a national level right now, so I just felt I should say that. And I'm wondering whether people on the national level looked at the governor's playbook. But that's not part of my question, that's just a comment. So about the tennis courts at Battery Park, what is the state of them now? And you said residents had to be moved, and I'm wondering, did the mayor arrange for them to have housing, or were they to figure that out for themselves? Also, why did he want the school board out of City Hall? And were any of the schools that he envisioned, like the art schools, et cetera, were any of them built after he left office? And also, he came into office wanting to streamline and make city operations more organized. They are now considered chaotic, and I'm wondering, did he streamline them and make them organized, and somehow once he was out of office, they fell into the chaos in which they are now?
Okay, well, let's see. The first questions were about Battery Park. Battery Park is a very uneven area. It goes downward, and the land there just filled up like a lake due to the collapsed sewer line and all of that rain. And I know there's at least one person attending today who lives in that area. And with the infrastructure restored, it's a beautiful park now, and it won't have that problem for probably another 100 years. Let's see, the schools. To my knowledge, there's not a school for the arts or math and science as Wilder had envisioned. The reason he wanted to, your question about why did he want to move them out of City Hall, departments within the administration were renting office space elsewhere in the city. I know that economic development was one that rented office space in downtown. And what he wanted to do was bring all those departments together at City Hall for better coordination and cohesion. He also thought that moving the school board offices to what's called the 3200 building on Broad offered a more spacious area with plenty of parking so that parents could come and visit the teachers and have the discussions rather than come to downtown where parking is very difficult. Let's see, what was your last question about the...
He wanted city operations to run smoothly and be organized, and I'm wondering, was he able to implement that? Because now many people feel that the city operates very inefficiently.
Oh, okay. Well, at the time that he was in his last year, 81% of the public thought the city was moving in the right direction. And in the two mayors that have since followed him, that poll has dropped to more like 37%, thought the city was going in the right direction. So based on public input, things have reverted from what he had set up in only the 4 years he had as mayor. Great questions.
Given Doug Wilder's concern about how the government was being run and in his effort to move the school board, looking at all those moving vans, where was he justifying getting the money to pay for all those moving vans?
Well, that's a good question. And it was all in the paper at the time, especially the Times-Dispatch. Monies were moved around from one category to another, and there was one vacant account that was used for the transition of government from the city manager form to the strong mayor form. So monies were juggled around, and that's how, about $500,000, and that's how it was made possible. there were actually also 6 moving vans packed and ready to go over to the new location at the time the judge issued the restraining order. So 6 tractor trailers had to come back and be put back in place to the degree they could.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I'm relatively new to Governor Wilder's, moving down here recently. What I noted when I first saw the slide of the presentation was you used the word ruled and strong arm politics. There's some negative connotations to that, I assumed. Your presentation has been very positive. My question are there parts of the book or parts of your experience that you would align with the use of those words? If that makes any sense.
Well, the people liked the way he ruled, so
Okay.
Governed, but that's not as snappy a title, you know. So
it was a literature choice versus a criticism.
but I had to, I had to get the strong arm in there. Some people didn't like that subtitle, but I had to get that in there because it was a forceful time.
But your sense is that it was a positive.
Oh, absolutely.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, to my memory, he also hired Rodney Monroe to be the chief of the police at that point in time when Richmond's murder rate was at a historic high. And by the time he left and during Mr. Monroe's tenure of police chief, the murder rate fell dramatically lower, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm just wondering why you didn't, is that part of your book or why you didn't choose to comment on that? Because it seems to me that was also a big part of helping burnishing Mr. Wilder's reputation as a can-do mayor when we were really in, when I think the public opinion of Richmond was pretty low at that time. And it certainly helped, I think, probably help the population believe that we were going in the right direction. That was a pretty bad time, as I remember.
Yeah, you're right. The Rodney Monroe was Wilder's first major appointment, and they had a very close relationship. And what Rodney Monroe brought to the police department was an organizational structure called geographic policing or community policing, where the same police officers would patrol the same neighborhoods every day. That's not always the case. People might think it is, but that's not always the case. Some jurisdictions, the police rotate around, so they never really know the particular characteristics of a certain neighborhood, you know, such as whether somebody's dog barks too much or the drunk that lives in the house on the corner. You know, they don't know the area. But when Wilder hired Monroe and Monroe implemented that structure, it drastically improved public safety. And that's all in the book.
I asked if he covered in his book the Maymont Bear episode.
Did I cover the Maymont Bear episode in the book? Yes, I did. And it was very ironic because it was very ironic and sad on many levels, one of which was that the mother of the child that was bitten by one of the bears was having discussions with the public health director as to whether or not to give the child tetanus. And meanwhile, there was a group of people, more than a dozen, representing the state health department, agriculture, you know, several state offices, as well as local people, that if the conversation had been held 2 hours earlier, those bears would not have been euthanized. It was when the mother of the child found out that the bears were euthanized, she was very upset because she didn't want that to happen. But there were certain forces within that large group of people that pushed this subject. And we're in favor of, frankly, euthanizing the bears, which was very sad. Of course, the public health director lost her job over the situation. So it was really sad from many angles.
Thank you so much. That's all the time we have, but we will be doing a signing in the lobby, and the book is available in the shop.
Yeah, thank you for coming out.